Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. Have you ever thought about how the art and culture of our past shape the creative expressions of today? It's fascinating to consider how nostalgia not only colors our memories, but also influences our artistic output. In today's ever evolving creative landscape, many artists juggle multiple projects, each a different facet of their imagination. And it raises an intriguing question. How does managing diverse creative endeavors impact an artist's expression and productivity? Is it possible that engaging with various forms of art could enhance your creativity, offering fresh perspectives and ideas? Well, for many creators, their artistic journey isn't just about pursuing passion projects, it's about hustling with the intensity of a full time job, regardless of whether it's driven by monetary gains. This approach often leads to an outpouring of creativity that resonates deeply with audiences, drawing on this rich collection of influences from past experiences, culture, and even media that's been consumed. So consider the role of sampling in music. In hip hop, for instance, sampling is not just a technique, it's a form of homage, a bridge that connects the old and the new, weaving past icons of the art into present rhythms and rhymes. It's about embedding part of one's personal history into the music. And how does this reflect in the music you love? Can you hear the echoes of the past in the rhythms and the lyrics? Well, today we have the pleasure of speaking with a fascinating guest, Ezekiel James Hampton. Ezekiel is not only an accomplished musician with multiple active musical projects, but also a budding entrepreneur. His debut LP features a mix of platinum gold and legendary MCs from the hip hop world. What's unique about his musical range is that his projects span from hip hop to an ambient record mastered by the one and only Taylor Dupree. His work is deeply infused with a sense of nostalgia, drawing heavily on the late 80s and 90s pop culture to create this unique auditory experience for his listeners. So join me as I welcome Ezekiel to the show as we explore these ever connected threads of creativity that bind us all together. So, Zeke, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. That is probably the best intro I think I've ever had, and truly depicts sort of my mindset with this approach. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. So let's take a journey backwards, if you will. Where did your love of music come from?
I think it's some of the earliest memories I have are being impacted by music. I'm an even I think the oldest memory I have, I probably was still an infant, and I remember my dad having these big giant '80s headphones and putting them on me, and I just remembered that some sounds were very soothing to me, and it's something about it. It's still to this day those early audible memories. I don't know if it's like were they that impactful to me as I was younger, or has my sense of nostalgia also somehow amplified that?
I feel that we are a musical family, even from before we became the three of us here in my household. The three of us, just like my kid was born singing, I think, and my husband was a musician, and I am a musician. Like we're all instrumental in some form or fashion, and I just music has always just kind of spoken to me. And then when you combine the fact that the 90s were hands down the best decade to live in, and no one will ever convince me otherwise, that was, in my opinion, like, I will argue that point until the cows come home. The music, the fashion, just this mentality of life isn't that complicated and we're just going to kind of figure it out together. That was kind of how I felt about the 90s. And maybe we all feel that way about the decade where our memories are most impressionable. I don't know. But um you have a lot of influences from the 80s and 90s in your work. So, what were some of those first sounds and artists that really resonated with you and sparked that desire to create music?
Yeah. So I'm primarily a keyboardist, and some people might say I have a unique background, but I definitely grew up with a lot of an immersion of 1980s like CCM. I grew up evangelical Christian, so it was a lot of um, so yeah, you probably would be
Uh
familiar with a
huh.
lot of the artists. Michael W. Smith was like probably the biggest influence, but bands like Petra and DeGarmo and Key, and all these bands, there's always like a guitar player. And so, being that even as a little kid, I could play piano by ear, it was always the people that made, you know, playing that instrument in a cool way. So for me, guitars were a big thing, and something that I've played in all the bands I've grown up playing with in. Um, and it was just something where it's like, wow, these are like I genuinely love the music, and I to this day it is my my sense of nostalgia, I will still put on those albums. And I can know that if I was listening to it for the first time, I probably wouldn't think much of it. But because I know how much it influenced me as a kid, like I can still listen to these, possibly outdated sounds, but with the same freshness that I had with like the ears of youth.
Yes, like you said all of those things, and all I could think was when I was in high school, our radio station was they had like the Power Hour, and that's what they played, DeGarmo and Key and
Yes.
Petra and all of. Oh my gosh, it was the best. And I can actually, I'm very proud of the fact that when I found my vinyl book of CDs in the attic as we were cleaning it out to move, I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to pull those out," because you're talking I introduced my kid to DC Talk when she was in like 3rd grade. Like it was the
Yeah.
best thing ever because it leaves an impression on you. You feel a certain way and you remember how you feel when you're listening to that music. But and I'm a huge fan of 90s country. Like that's you could throw a little in
Yeah.
from the 80s and maybe the early 2000s, not a whole lot, but I was wearing out my Lone Star CDs and John Michael Montgomery and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. They were on repeat all the time. So was there an artist that you had on repeat that just kind of made you go like this is me in the future?
Well, so it's funny you say that too, because for me, it was my dad really was the influence that brought in all this like Christian pop rock music, but my mom was strictly like she loved that country, and I don't listen to so much country now, but something about like late '80s, early '90s country music was definitely that was within my wheelhouse, and I still can listen to music from that time too and get really excited about it. Um, so from like I would say especially with the album I just released, there is one song I have where Winona Judd's song "Only Love." Maybe not her most famous of the hits, but I remember a song that I used to from the boombox record watching the TNN music videos playing from the TV, and I would record on the boombox. And so I have a song where the whole sample. That's the sample is that song, and another one actually. The first single was the song called "Pace Myself." It's got these two DeGarmo and Key songs on it, the 666 and Competition. And then there's a little bit of Michael W. Smith, Ashton, the instrumental track. They make up the whole samples and they all mesh together so well. So
Okay, so clearly this sounds like something that you didn't just decide to do one day. It was probably like writing a novel. Like writing my first novel looked very different from writing the second novel and the third novel, but every experience was this learning opportunity. So, what were some of the skills you were like, "Okay, I really want to do this, but how do I go about improving it?" What did that process look like?
yeah, yeah. So for the hip hop album, I kind of always wanted to do something with that. I mean, even since the days of high school, I was making beats and making funny, silly raps with friends. But I love so many different genres of music that it never really became a priority. I was always kind of trying to make more like the rock band thing happen, and I always had weird taste in music, even as a kid. I loved like world music and new age music. So in the time of like junior high, people are always asking, "Are you a rocker or a rapper?" You used to always get reduced to that.
Yes.
I always kind of struggled because I liked rock. I was starting to like hip hop, but I was really into a lot of like new age and a lot of like movie scores and instrumental music, and eventually got into a lot of like techno and electronica. Um, but I think with hip hop, you know what? My rock band project was kind of taking a little bit of a break, and like it started, I would say in 2019, where I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna come up trying to find some rappers that are kind of like up and coming and trying just interested in collaborating. Um, and then it probably took a big shift in 2022 when I decided, you know what, I wonder if I can work with some like underground rappers or people that I really liked for a long time, and I don't know what that process is. So, but I've always been pretty ambitious and very much from the school of DIY. You just figure it out, do it yourself. So I just started, messaging some folks on Instagram, finding a business email, shooting emails, doing whatever I could to get a hold of some rappers because I thought maybe that could elevate my project. I'm a nobody, who's just who I like to make beats, and how do I get to these collaborations? So it really was just throwing everything at the wall, getting 500% more no's than yeses, but not letting that deter me. I'm like, okay, I'm on to the next. I'll keep moving on. And ultimately, I did not really see an album with 20 songs with as many names on it that I was able to work with. Really was just in the last 2 years. So
That's funny. I was literally going to ask you, did you ever imagine that you would be where you are today? Because collaborating is one, it's nerve wracking to put yourself out there and say, hey, I want to work with you. Do you want to work with me? Because you have this, I know for me, I have this in the back of my mind constantly saying you're not up to that standard. You're not going to be, they've got all this experience under their belt, or they've already made it, and who am I to even ask if they want to work with me? But I
yeah.
will just say, like, some of those experiences, collaborating is a huge deal, especially in the creative world. We're just so scared to do it. So that was what I was going to ask you, is how do you go about picking people to collaborate with? And did you ever think you would be where you are today?
I definitely did not think that I would be where I'm at today in the sense of like I have an album and I have it's such a marketable album for somebody like me in terms of when I try to work with PR companies or anything like that. It's like, hey, like I'm constantly I got a chip on my shoulder and I'm motivated by negative energy, and that sounds bad, but what I mean by that is kind of like I compare it to maybe like the football player that went undrafted that got put onto a team. I'm motivated by my desire to have more and belief in myself that I can achieve more. Um, at the end of the day, I'm also learning about the business. Because I don't come from the music business. I had an internship at a record label 20 years ago. And I've always wanted to be a part of that world. But I've also kind of felt like a little bit of a wannabe in the sense that it's never worked out for me professionally, and I've played with a lot of talented people. I played with people that have had more success than me. But I have this desire of like why I don't want to give it up. Like, I'm 40 years old. I don't have kids, so I have a lot of opportunity in positioning to really just kind of keep going, and also learning to recalibrate what success is to me. Because for many years, I wanted the rock star like life. I wanted to go on tour and have that be my full time job. And where I'm at now, that's recalibrating success to me is like, hey, can I find a way to monetize this? And if I can get if I can get more streams or if I can get more followers, like that to me is just about moving forward.
I love that, because you do have to change your perspective on what is success. What does it mean? When will I feel like I'm successful? And that is such a hard place to be sometimes, especially when you're in that middle world of, I'm not the worst, but I'm clearly not the best, or I'm not at the top yet. Somebody hasn't found me, and I know that my work is good. That is a mentality that you kind of have to say, all right, at this moment, at what I'm doing right now, it is successful. And so, because imposter syndrome is so real, it is so real, and it's such a struggle. Um, Now, how many projects at a time do you have going on?
I have three main projects, and I usually have the bandwidth to do two at a time. The Probably I would say the one that is the most personal to me is my ambient music project. And that doesn't usually take up as much time to do because, first of all, there's not really a lot of successful, ambient music artists in the sense of like they can just make their living doing that. But it's something that's easy to me. It's all the compositions are all improvised. Um, and so I don't have to put as much effort into that in terms of making it, sort of public ready or super shiny. And then I have my pop music project, Skylight Motion Picture, um, which is kind of more collaborative because I'm not really a singer. I like to sing, and I'm kind of I'm best suited as like a harmony backup guy. So I'll usually be working with different vocalists. But it's um, I try to make. I think going forward, the next time I do that, I'll probably take an approach more similar to with my hip hop album, where I'm working with somebody maybe that's a little bit more established, and it helps elevate my project. So and then the hip hop one is I think I'm discovering I'll probably start putting more attention towards that because I think one of the goals with putting out this album was just trying to give some establishment as a producer for hire. And if I have a resume that says these are all the names I've worked with, maybe it can kind of give me a little bit more momentum there than in the other projects.
Oh, I like that. I am one of those people that I'm completely incapable of shifting between projects like on the same day. So if I'm doing interviews, which for this month I do, like I said, 3 to 4 interviews a day, and so I am constantly in this administrative podcast mode. So I cannot sit down and write a novel or anything to do with my novels. Like at night, my dreams will be so bizarre and crazy because it's me like trying to do something in a fictitious world, but it's very administrative and it drives me crazy. My brain cannot split the two up. So how do you shift gears between these? What does that typical day look like? Do you do them all three in one day? What's that look like?
Definitely not. I mean, I have a full time day job that keeps me pretty busy, but my girlfriend travels for work a lot, so that's kind of where I tend to find the most time to spend on it. And it's actually kind of nice because if I do get fatigue, which if you spend enough time, the nice thing is rather than shifting into another music project being more fatigue or more work, to me it's almost like I can shift gears and I can still keep the momentum going forward. But having the different projects, it's actually like get to take breaks from one, go into another, and feel refreshed about it. So
That's nice. Yeah, I can't even I have multiple works in progress all the time. I have 4 to 5 different books that ideas pop into my head and I have to go write. But once I'm in one world, I can't shift gears. And it's probably a little bit different because there's a technical side and an imaginative side. And so it might be a little bit different. But like I would love to be able to do that, but I just can't quite make my brain do that. So I that's fantastic. So you've also ventured into entrepreneurship with creating a wine brand. Like where did that even come from?
yeah, so I mean I've been working in the wine industry for gosh, I think 15 years or it's 15 to 16 years. And I have a friend that I grew up with. We're from the same town in Vacaville, California. We both kind of got into wine at the same time. I was more into like probably like the business side, and he was more into like production and winemaking side. So we kind of had this parallel journey of learning about wine and eventually wanting to start our own label. And it took many years, and eventually though we did. And I think our first vintage was 2018, and it's really small. I mean, it's 50 cases a year. We make one wine, Petite Syrah. And to me, I kind of find it as a great opportunity as somebody who's interested in kind of having a brand. um, as the idea, I got to sort of incorporate a lot of the aesthetics and sort of the creative influences, a lot of the music stuff into the brand itself. And we got to make a wine that is kind of unique for the varietal. Petit Syrah tends to be sort of this big, inky, very brooding wine, and we, kind of wanted to make a little more like minimal interventionist version of that, a little less new oak, and like underscore more of the feminine aspects of that, what that varietal can show. So that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, no kidding. So, how does this complement your musical projects, or is it completely separate?
It's, I would say, from a fulfillment standpoint, it's different. For wine, it's also 50 cases a year. You're not going to be making a living, making that small of a production. I like having it. I love being able to share it. It's mostly friends and fellow people in the wine industry that buy the wines. Um, but at the end of the day, I don't have the yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have like the same amount of emotional investment. Whereas like, hey, if for some reason if I need to just kind of fold that 10 up and move on, it's not going to be a big deal. Whereas music, that's pretty much what gives me so much motivation to get up every day. It's what is it's just more personal fulfilling.
I totally get that. Yeah, and it's okay to diversify your passions and your projects and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, if it isn't what brings that fulfillment, then yeah, it is totally okay to say, you know what, that was a great season. It's time to move on and do what I absolutely love. So, what projects do you have coming up, or what is the project you want to talk about and share with us the most?
Yeah. So within the last month, I've released two new albums for my ambient project. It's the moniker is Radagast the Brown, and that I just released my fifth album called Lamps of Unending Light. Um, And that was really fun just because each album, each project, I kind of try to approach the musical aesthetic a little bit differently. And I'm, primarily a keyboard player, but I've done, I've kind of explored different elements with each one. So this lamps of unending light, it's a little bit more guitar driven, and also I don't play violin or cello, but I know just with I know how to compose for it, or how to write melodies and then kind of outsource it. So I was able to get a violinist and a cellist to play on it as well. And the idea was kind of sort of creating this audible winter. I found this awesome photographer named Robert Covey, and his photos to me, they were almost like the visual representation of how I heard the music. So, and I was able to get my first record deal as well with a small little label called I You Records out of Tokyo, Japan. And they've been great just in kind of helping support the release. So that came out on April 17th. Um, and then my debut hip hop album, which I do under the name Rad Brown. To me, I have to keep a separate name because
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. That's so different. But I wanted something that at least connected. So I've got Radagasta Brown for my ambient project, Rad Brown for hip hop project, and that just came out on May 10th. So it's been out 10 days, and I have been very surprised at the success of this so far. It's the number 4 most added hip hop album to non-commercial radio in North America. And non-commercial basically is like college radio, public radio. I would say most amply digital. So for me, it's been really exciting just to see how quickly with the numbers coming with the amount of streams. And I think we'll probably get around 20K by the end of today. And so that's been really, really exciting, and it's something I don't think I could have done without having the work of a lot of the artists that I collaborated with.
Well, congratulations on that. And I will say that I think you had some on Instagram, some samples of your music and stuff on Instagram, or they've been in the feed lately. And I was actually really impressed. Don't take that the wrong way, but that is not my genre, right? And so I was like, wow, this is good. So congratulations.
Thank
And
you.
there you go. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very exciting. And so what do you see on the horizon? Are you going to pick one direction and kind of focus on that? Because here, and I ask that because so I write in two different genres right now. And I will say that once I left my first genre, I only wrote two books. I'm working on a third. It's not there yet, but I've kind of immersed myself in this second genre, and that's where I find my heart, right? Like that's where I find my love and my passion for writing even more, just easier flow with the words. So I'm sticking with that path for right now. What are you thinking?
I kind of it's hard for me to go against what I'm feeling, kind of like intuitively in the moment. If I could if I could duplicate myself, I know I would be doing a lot more. I've got so many ideas of with my Scarlet Motion Picture project, and kind of getting back into something that's a little bit more like indie pop. But I do think that I probably will capitalize on the momentum with the hip hop project. It's kind of like with the ambient project. It doesn't take me long to come up with the music and to come up with the beat. And I think that I can almost see a little bit more of a pathway in terms of riding on the momentum to. I think the next step would be working with an artist and co-releasing like an EP together. Um, I'll probably take a break from doing long albums like that are 20 tracks long, just because I don't think I could afford to do something like that again for a while. So I'm like, if I just can focus on, releasing, little EP, 5-track EPs with artists, and just kind of, build in my clout and sort of just kind of force myself in that world as, a producer from the Bay Area who, is taking it seriously.
I love that. No, do what you love. I mean, that's what it sums up to. Do what you love, but also do follow that intuition because that's kind of where I am right now. It's like, okay, I see where I want to go, and I know that this is going to be the path that gets me there. Even though I do kind of want to go back and revisit my first my first series and kind of add to it. I'm like, I don't know, like the passion isn't there. And so right now, I'm just going to stick to this path because I think it's the one that I'm supposed to take. So I love that mindset. Okay, so we are to the point of the show where we're going to flip the script, and you are now the host of Connected Conversations for Creatives. And so take it away.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think you kind of summed it up in your intro. One of my favorite topics to explore and indulge in is nostalgia. And so I always like to, think about what are the, if like for me, if I'm a musician, what are like the non-musical influences? And if you're a writer, like what are some of the non-writing influences that you have? So, and I was born in 1983, so for me it is really that kind of late 80s, early 90s, era that was sort of the biggest impression on me. And I'm a big cinema person. I can probably geek out on movies and the history of cinema more than music, more than anything. So I'm curious for you, what are some of the cinematic influences that you might have?
It's funny. I was also born in 1983, so we have the same, probably a lot of the same influences. But I will say that we weren't so much cinematic in the movie realm, but I was definitely like I consumed television like nobody's. It was like the 80s
Yeah.
and 90s. Like all you had to do was you either played Nintendo or you watched TV, like or you played outside. Like those were the only options. And
Hmm.
so and also music. And so as a writer, like the series that I'm writing now, it kind of centers on 90s country. And it is there's a country music reality television show that they're competing on, like there's like 12 contestants and they're all competing to win this. Just kind of like American Idol but for
Hmm.
country music.
Yeah.
And so like those were some of the things that we grew up watching, and that was really, I guess, really early 2000s more than anything. But like American Idol, I remember like we would watch like loyally. We were invested in, Clay Aiken and Ruben Studdard. I mean, Ruben was from Alabama. It's like you had to
Yeah.
be for Ruben, that's because that's where I'm from. And so, like, I just remember we would come home from church on Wednesdays to see, I think it was the result shows on Wednesday or something. And we were like
Uh-huh.
piled in my parents' bed watching. So, stuff like that, I remember very vividly, and it has influenced my work now,
I
which is funny.
yeah. I randomly will get his song "Sorry 2004" stuck in my head. Sometimes I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, vaguely. Oh my gosh. Yes. That's a nice little flashback.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Ooh, guys, we're getting an interview and a show. Take it away. No, that's fantastic. No, I do love that though. And my kid, she can, like, we have 80s and 90s on. We have XM radio. We get in the car and she's like 80s or 90s today. Like, and she hates country music. God love her,
Mhm.
bless her heart, kind of thing. But 90s pop, that kid, it comes on the radio and it's in her, and I'm like, yes, I've done something right as a parent.
Yeah. What about, do you remember there was like an American Idol country show back in the day called Be a Star. I don't know if you remember that on TNN. This would have
Oh,
been
I
probably like early
don't.
mid 90s.
So I, growing up evangelical, it was a little stricter than even because my dad is also a pastor, and so we were not
Oh,
allowed
I'm a
to.
former PK too. Yeah.
Are you? Bless your heart. Um, if I'm being honest, bless your heart. Um, but so we were not allowed to listen to secular music unless it was oldies. Like we could listen to the 60s and 70s, which
Hmm.
I mean, some of those songs are just as interesting. But anyway, so it was very strict on what we could and couldn't listen to. And so that also went to the TV. So I didn't watch MTV unless I was at somebody's house. I didn't watch TNN unless I was at somebody else's house, but I knew it
Yeah.
was there.
What about Nickelodeon? Because I think we grew up in the best era of Nickelodeon.
We totally grew up in the best era of Nickelodeon. Like they had Disney beat hands down at that point.
Oh
It's
yeah.
yeah, no, Nickelodeon was, and then like Nick at Night and TV Land when all of that's, oh man, it's good stuff.
Do you have a favorite? Because Nickelodeon they had a lot of shows at that time. There were like one or two seasons. Was there any? What was the most obscure Nickelodeon show that you really liked from that era?
I don't know if Pete and Pete. Do you remember Pete and Pete?
Oh, I own them on DVD. I'm like, yes,
Yes.
and that's a show that just gets better even as an adult.
It does. It's oh my gosh. And so, yes, I say that and it's like, what, or even Stevens. I loved even Stevens and all that. And they're not really obscure unless you're, younger than we are, but still I was just like, I never left the television like ever.
Yeah. No, I think, but
That's so funny.
honestly, the way you described it earlier, which for me, it's like, everybody's on phones and tablets now. But yeah, it was you play outside all day, and then you go in and you watch TV all night. And I know for me, especially Fridays it was TJF, Saturdays it was SNCC,
Yes.
and it was we had Saturday was a big chore day in our house. So the kids, we were all put to work, but we were always trying to get it done really quickly. And then the days if me and my brother could finish up by 2 or 2:30, which was rare, but we'd start with wrestling, and then we get into eventually a lot of the sort of the Saturday night shows, a lot of the cartoons, and it was just the most exciting thing as a kid.
It was, and I remember, like, my parents were very Friday nights, like, we were in front of the TV as a family on Friday nights to watch TGIF, like, the Full House and all that. So we started trying to watch Full House again when I think my kid was probably, like, 10 or 11, and I was like, "This might be a little too mature." Like, I did not remember. I did not remember, and I was just like, "Man, TV was so different then." Like, you could get away with so much. It was interesting.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, what's funny? I would say a big non-musical influence for the hip hop for me, because I didn't get into that till later, was one of my favorite shows of all time, which a lot of the content would not air today, is In Living Color. Um,
Yes!
yeah, In Living Color was to me, I think it definitely was the greatest sketch show, and probably my favorite show. But they always had hip hop. They were before Chappelle Show was doing it. They always had hip hop guests coming on at the end, and that was some of the early introductions to that world for me. Was because I was just super into In Living Color, and I'll still occasionally YouTube a lot of the bits, and yeah, a lot of the stuff they wouldn't air today.
You are not wrong about that. And I love that, when I'm sitting here writing my books and again, it takes place in my imagination in the 90s. And so I'm not having to work technology in, I'm not having to think about, eventually towards the end, as they're getting older, they might have a cell phone to like text somebody, but it's going to cost them a quarter to text somebody, because that wasn't something that we just sat there and just obsessed over. It was
Mhm.
it was very simple, I think. And we had this mentality of things are about to change. We could feel it. Things were going to change, especially, Y2K. Oh my gosh, the world's going to end and that kind of thing. But we just kind of took it in stride. Whereas now it's like, oh, it's so different. And I really hate that my kid can't grow up in the 90s because it was so good.
Yeah. There was, I don't know if you remember, so before Ryan Reynolds was super famous, a lot of those Nickelodeon shows that we watched, they were filmed in Canada. So there's always those kind of Canadian accents,
Yeah.
a lot of Canadian actors. And Nickelodeon, I don't think they only had maybe a season or two. They had their first soap opera. They had a show called 15. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that.
It had a young Ryan Reynolds, but it was. I remember it's kind of a big deal. I had an older sister too; she's a couple years older, so like, I'd always hear her and her friends talk about it, because they dealt with serious issues like teen drinking and relationships. But it was, it was really probably consumed by a lot of people that were, you know, in the junior high age, and I was a little bit younger. But I think it was kind of controversial, and it wasn't on for very long, but it was one of those
Interesting.
more obscure shows that was pretty fun.
Yeah, no, I don't remember that one. But I would go to a friend's house and we'd watch Beverly Hills 90210, which that one was definitely
Oh
a
yeah,
little more controversial then.
wasn't allowed to watch that either. I remember that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't technically either, but if my mom is listening, I'm sorry, not sorry. It's like where
What's
we are right now.
interesting? Do you find yourself, because I think for me, I was very fascinated by a lot of, whether it was film, music, the stuff that was kind of, I was told, no, we don't listen to this, or this is bad for you. And I found myself interestingly exploring those worlds a little bit as I got older, and I would say in particular with movies, there were a couple of movies that were always demonized, no pun intended, but like The Exorcist is one of them. The Last Temptation of Christ, another one. And it's so funny because as I ended up my natural curiosity watching those films later, and I'm sure there's musical examples too, but it really made me think about, like, why was this so considered so bad? If anything, I found a lot of like great, like, faith positive things for me personally. I found faith positive things about these films that were, considered so controversial in the evangelical world.
So mine were more books than movies or TV.
Hmm.
And here, and this is one of those confessions that makes me go cringe, but I was not allowed to read Harry Potter. Like, that was a thing that you did not read
Hmm.
because magic, witchcraft, oh my goodness. And so I didn't read Harry Potter until I was 30. And then I became obsessed. And I'm not saying that Harry Potter was a gateway drug, but I will just say that I have definitely branched out in my reading materials. I don't write what I read, but I definitely read what I read. And
Hmm.
and it would definitely be frowned upon by very conservative evangelical folks, but I think that's between you and your higher power. If you know, if the Holy Spirit says don't do it, then don't do it, and that's between you and him.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way, very diplomatic way to put it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and would that go over well in church? Probably not, but that's the argument that I make, and I'm sticking to it. So that's where we are. Okay, Zeke, I'm going to take the reins back here and ask you, how can listeners connect with you and your work?
Yeah. So for my hip hop album, which it's called Upper Crust Confections. It's under the name Rad Brown. So it's on wherever you stream your music, you'll find it. I'm on Instagram and TikTok under at Rad Brown Beats. Um, and my ambient project is Radagast the Brown, with the new album being Lamps of Unending Light. Same thing, wherever you get your music, you'll find that there. And then my indie pop project is called Skylight Motion Picture. Also at Skylight Motion Picture for Instagram, all those things. And wherever you get your music.
Fantastic. And we'll put all of that in the show notes. So it will be very simple to go and click a link and find all of your work. And that's very exciting. Okay, so we are to the big question. And this is the big question that is going to change the trajectory of the world. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay, what is one piece of advice or encouragement you want listeners to walk away with if they hear nothing else today?
I would say ask yourself, how bad do you really want something? If you, are you willing to sacrifice other things? Are you willing to, sacrifice major life decisions? Are you willing to sacrifice relationships? In terms of thinking about, what it is, whatever your goal, whatever you're after. Because I know for me, I've played with a lot of folks that are really talented, but because maybe necessarily the level of desire, to achieve what you want to achieve for yourself isn't quite always on the same page. And so it's like for me, there's been positioning of life to be able to do this, and the money, all that stuff's not necessarily my main motivation. Because if that is, you're going to get discouraged and you're going to fail. But if you have this desire that is it's unquenchable and you just have to keep doing it, it's basically just about moving forward. So find success in those little small steps. And even if it's like, hey, I just got a couple new followers this week, like find gratitude in that, keep pushing forward, and just find a way. Like, don't, if you have to recalibrate what success is or recalibrate the scale, then it's just about moving forward.
I love that because it's so true. And not every sacrifice is going to cost you an arm and a leg. It may be
Mhm.
something small, but yeah, you kind of have to ask yourself, how badly do I want this? And if you're not willing to make the sacrifices, you probably don't want it that badly. Hmm, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's kind of like putting your money where your mouth is, and action oriented. So because you can have, I feel like if without the action part, then it's more about like a dream than it's like, and I'm a dreamer at heart. So it's like, but I think the difference between letting something hang out in the dream realm to something that's in the real world, it's going to be the action part.
That is fantastic advice. I had a guest a couple of seasons ago, and she said, I've had my work in progress for about 5 years, and I haven't gotten it to the point where I'm happy with it yet. And I said, here's the thing, right now, that's not. it's not even in progress. Like, it is stagnated, right? You have to take that step forward to put it out there, because if you don't put what you've worked so hard on out there,
Mhm.
nobody will ever find it and say, "Hey, let me help you make this better," and that kind of thing. So yeah, you have to take that first step. Fear, never mind. I was about to say something that I've asked people not to say on my show, but just don't let fear get in the way. Like, don't let
Mhm.
fear get in the way. Just yeah.
Yeah, because if you put something out and kind of like you said, like, oh, you just got to put it out, because those are also where you get your moments of growth. I know for me, I'm at 40 years old. Like, with each thing that I release, each thing that I do, I look back and I see how much of a how much it was part of the learning process. Compared to 2 3 years ago, I know more about music business now and more about music production now. And then 2 3 years ago, I knew more about it than 2 or 3 years before that. So it's I almost kind of think about it like the tortoise and the hare. Sometimes I feel like I'm the tortoise, slow and steady, but you know what, always moving forward, and just always finding ways to stay driven and motivated and excited. um, and also the gratitude of thinking about, hey, you're getting to where you want to go. You're getting that knowledge. You're getting the growth. It's just that may not be at the pace that you want, but you keep moving forward. And when you reflect and you compare to previous times, that's, I think, when you can really feel like, wow, I have really made strides. And maybe I'm not where I want to be today still, but like I'm closer now than I was 2 3 years ago.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Zeke, thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation. I think that it's so interesting to hear from people who are in a totally different world of creativity than I am, because that is such a foreign place to me. But it's so intriguing to know that we all have the same struggles and we all have the same desires to get our art out into the world, and just hearing how other artists have done it, and to be encouraged by that. Thank you for sharing that encouragement with the listeners.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely feel a kindred spirit in you, and the same,
Yeah.
love of being able to reflect, and I love that.
Yes, me too. Thank you.